If you were granted one single wish, what would it be? Would you rewrite your destiny? Would you desire riches beyond what the eye can see? Really think about it for a second. Alright, time's up. As for me, well, honestly, either of the first two sound pretty nice. If I had unlimited wishes, however, one of them would be for Season 3 of Magi. Remember Magi? Because it seems the studio in charge of it didn't, but Magi was one of the first anime I watched. Correction, it was The Adventures of Simbad, a prequel series to Magi, and in search for more of the fucking goat himself, I stumbled upon a series I love to this day. But it wasn't just me. Over a decade ago, oh my god, it was over a decade ago, Magi would get an anime adaptation in 2012 titled Magi Labyrinth of Magic. That year, it was 9th in sales, right below Hunter x Hunter. What makes the sales impressive for that year is the first season of the anime released from late 2012 through 2013, immediately followed by a second season titled Magi Kingdom of Magic, which was released from 2013 through 2014. Those next 2 years, Magi would climb up the rankings and then remain in the top 10, being 4th in 2013 and 8th in 2014. Fans eagerly awaited Season 3, as the story was getting better and better. But then a year passed, then another year. We got a spin-off season of a prequel series, Adventures of Simbad, so now fans were waiting for Season 2 of Simbad and Season 3 of Magi. But a year passed, then another, and now a decade later and still nothing. Magi as a manga has finished, sitting at 369 chapters, and same with Adventures of Simbad sitting at 182. Die-hard fans still have no word on what happened with the anime disappearing, and the world has long since moved on. Still, the story of Magi is beloved for good reasons. The setting of Magi is one of the most memorable aspects of it, having loose inspiration from Arabian Nights. It's an Arabic setting where no one looks Arab, but it's anime, so fuck it. In my video about Soul Eater, which was barely about Soul Eater, it's a long rant about the importance of style, which Magi has in spades, and it's a world with substance, not just flash. Lore that makes it feel layered and provides aspects that each have a strong appeal, introducing us to the magic via one of the main characters and the dungeons, but then evolves into different kingdoms, managing war and politics, creating a blend of magic and real-world issues, explored mainly through the two main characters of the series, Aladdin and Ali Baba. Aladdin is introduced being clearly not from this world, and his origins being built up through the series. He runs into Ali Baba, an individual who seems to only care for riches, but it then becomes apparent to Aladdin that Ali Baba is good at heart and a special human being. Aladdin is revealed to be an anomaly early on, a fourth Magi, in a world that is only supposed to have 3. Beings of immense magical power that can alter the course of humanity by summoning dungeons and guiding special people known as king vessels to conquer these dungeons and gain immense power granted to them by jinns. Powerful magic beings that test people who enter the dungeon and decide if they will serve the person. Usually people only conquer one dungeon, therefore having the power of one jinn. With this power, they can transform via jinn equips, leading to some of the dopest designs and not a complicated system, but a fun one within Battle Shonen. Ali Baba is a bastard prince who Aladdin guides and conquers the dungeon of Aman, but with great power comes a fuck ton of headaches. Ali Baba, feeling the duty to help his fallen country of Balbad, gets involved with some very powerful individuals at the top of the world's food chain, the Kingdom of Ko and their Magi Judar, a user of Dark Rook. Rook being those butterflies you see, and they inhabit everything and are what souls return to. They are the magic source of this series. Yeah, Judar controls the evil version of that, and is who I place here on the tier list of Magi characters, who are trying to take over Balbad, but then another character steps in to help Ali Baba and ensure that the Ko Empire isn't out of control. The man to capture the first dungeon and lead this new era of kings and magic. User of 7 different jinns. Adventurer, conqueror and playboy of the 7 seas. The king of Sindria. And the fucking goat, Simbad. This character was one of 3 things that had an irreversible impact on my personality in the 2010s. This character was so beloved that he got a spin-off manga detailing his adventures before we meet him in Magi, and that manga would get an adaptation, although only 1 season of an anime. Ladies, I know the recent obsession has been the men in JJK, but I mean, come on. Deadbeat, dumped at a KFC, and has as much communication skills as your ex. Versus King of the 7 Seas. Simbad, in all seriousness, is an excellent portrayal of the strongest, mixed in with a character cursed with seeing fate itself. Probably my favorite, since he explores the nuances of having to guide a country and the balance of the world itself. Including what we then see in Adventures of Simbad, he goes from a wide-eyed adventurer to getting your hands dirty and becoming what at one point you detested. A character that has one of my favorite moments of introspection and honesty, but still needing others to call out his flaws. At the beginning of Adventures of Simbad, his character is pretty standard, and he comes off less interesting than he does in Magi, but the more the story goes on in the manga, the burden and fine lines you have to walk when you are perceived as special makes for an interesting prequel series, adding more context to the character we see throughout the series, especially when it comes to the final arc. Whenever he appears in Magi, however, there is a massive shift that is about to happen. Meanwhile, the story jumps between Aladdin and Alibaba as they get separated often. This is one of the more unique aspects of Magi, where it really does have two central protagonists that it switches between almost every other arc, and you get to see them grow on their own and then come together. Aladdin learns more about his origins and the origins of the world, and his desire to love humanity and believe in them being put to the test when he witnesses death and war and the cycle of it all. Alibaba, meanwhile, is learning more about the world when it comes to the realm of politics, and what it takes to properly guide people by working with them instead of ruling over them, seen when he turns Balbad into a republic instead of becoming its king, despite having a rightful place on the throne. Another aspect of Alibaba that almost slipped my mind was the great comedy with the character that is very well timed and helps break tension, since sometimes this series can be a lot with the information that it gives you. And Morgiana is another important character, being a household vessel, someone who works under a king's vessel. She was freed from slavery by Aladdin and Alibaba, is in our introduction to one of the most powerful races on the planet, the Fenaris. Also Hakuryu, a prince of the Ko Empire who wishes to destroy it and exact revenge on his mother. It's an anime law for a character with black hair to explore revenge, but what I appreciate about Magi and its characters in general is that it explores these concepts but takes it a step further than most series would, making the characters feel more than the tropes they fall under. So a very strong cast of characters, some of which get even better once you read Adventures of Simbad, particularly those that have to do with the Kingdom of Sindria. In Magi, the series begins as a lighthearted adventure, but as these characters get stronger and learn more, it shifts into a more mature series. It's easy to see why it had the success mentioned at the start of the video, once brought to life in the anime, but when the next season was due to push the series even more, never came. There isn't really anything I could find stating why Season 3 of Magi never came out. The only interview I saw in regards to the author was her talking about Orient, but there are multiple factors that when put together paint an unfortunate reality. Beginning with the studio that was in charge of Magi, A1 Pictures. A1 is interesting, helping put series on the map and push them to new heights of popularity with strong first seasons. Blame them for the second explosion of solo leveling and making isekai popular with Sword Art Online. But also they have Fairy Tail, Fate Grand Order and Apocrypha, Kaguya-sama, 86, Space Brothers, Erased. They have a good track record of giving things good adaptations regardless of the quality of the material they have to work with. They also, however, have a track record of mishandling production of certain series. Magi, Blue Exorcist, which was previously covered, and Seven Deadly Sins, which is probably the most popular example, with the later seasons they made being a frequent example of awful animation. Ironically, it could be theorized that A1 decided to move on from Magi to work on Seven Deadly Sins, given the timeline of events, that it was close to matching Magi in sales in 2014 without an anime, since its first season came out late 2015, talking about Seven Deadly Sins. The anime for Magi had caught up to the manga, and it seemed like the most logical step, making 1 or 2 seasons and then leaving the rest without an adaptation to push viewers to read and buy the manga is a common practice when it comes to series. Also, you can move on to a series that is guaranteed to do well given the popularity it has already without an anime adaptation. A1 might have also learned from their previous mistakes with Blue Exorcist, going off the canon with a bunch of filler and releasing a season years later when there was no longer the same interest might not have been something they wanted to do with Magi. A different studio would be in charge of Adventures of Simbad, Ladus Productions, which also worked on Fate Grand Order and a whole bunch of bullshit, not gonna lie to you. So why is there no season 2 of Simbad? No clue. Look, I know, I don't know, but like, what do you want me to do, lie to you? There isn't any information on the sales of Adventures of Simbad, and it's not like they had anything else to work on. The only assumption I can make is they decided to call it after 1 season and leave the rest for the manga readers. Magi was possibly abandoned for a series that would end up being a laughingstock, and Adventures of Simbad got slapped with the hit and quit. At this point, Magi Season 3 can be put up there with Vagabond coming back, and Asura's Wrath remake, Kid Icarus Uprising ported to the Switch 2, Bloodborne being ported to PC, and the Raiders winning another Super Bowl. A whole bunch of desperate cope. But as the anime disappeared, the manga continued strong, reaching its most interesting point where we get strong character moments for Alibaba in the next arc. The origins of the world and Aladdin are revealed to all of the important players in what could have been a massive war. What I believe to be the absolute best character moments for Aladdin, Alibaba, Simbad, Judar, and Hakuryu are all in the final arcs. The final 3 arcs I will touch up on my issues with, but overall are fantastic, especially the second to last arc, Co-Empire, which put me through one hell of an emotional roller coaster with one of my favorite fights ever, making it all the more frustrating that we never got a Season 3 or 4 of Magi, because with the right animation, so many amazing moments could be brought to life. If someone wants to leave a comment as a petition to have A1 drop solo leveling and put all their effort into Magi, feel free. Last thing I want is a half-assed, boring disappointment of a remake like we have with Kenshin and Shaman King. The series for a moment takes on a very different feel at the beginning of the very last arc, having to do with war via negotiations and trade. But the final arcs as a whole are truly something to remember. I really like the ending of Magi overall, but admittedly, parts of it feel overwhelming. Which doesn't make me feel as if the series ended poorly, but that there is a lot of information, a lot of new information that isn't really given the time to be grounded and absorbed before we are shot into the next groundbreaking revelation. Going from a magical series to a massive lore dump for an entire arc, a good one nonetheless, but still lore dump, back to a magical war series to a series about politics and trade. These were all different aspects that were sprinkled in throughout, but in the final stretch of Magi, it is easy to get the feeling that it is a jarring shift to one jarring shift. Then finally going from trade to a huge moral debate about how to best handle the fate of the world and the role of God. It's the climax of this grand debate about what truth even is, the nature of fate, and having each character provide an answer of what they believe and try to figure it all out. It does a good job of addressing these things, and the lore is very interesting and makes sense, but I think some better pacing with each of these things would have really knocked it out of the park. There is speculation that the author was rushed to finish Magi quickly, but regardless of the amount that happens in the end of Magi, it being able to remain reasonable where most series would fall apart is impressive. I think if the series had 500 chapters, or at the very least more chapters right after the end, it would have been a bit more of a smooth read. Still, rereading it for this video was a blast, and I would highly recommend anyone to check out everything this series has out. In fact, here is a quick guide for those that want to get into Magi through the anime and continue the manga where it leaves off. Magi Season 1 and 2 has a total of 50 episodes, which covers the first 198 chapters of the manga, ending off on the Magnastad arc. Adventures of Simbad has 13 episodes, which covers the first 55 chapters of the manga, ending off at the Artemyra arc, legit right before it gets good. Even though I have a soft spot for Adventures of Simbad, I wouldn't recommend the anime in place of the manga early on, and I also wouldn't recommend it before Magi even though it's a prequel, since Simbad's character in Magi helps add context to what happens early in Adventures of Simbad, to create a sense of intrigue in how this character transforms, instead of the feeling that Simbad is a Gary Stu that will never face any challenges. The rest of the series goes on to prove that wrong, but if you only went off Season 1 of the Adventures of Simbad, I can see that happening. Magi, however, is worth going through the anime first if that is your preference. Wishing for Magi Season 3 at this point is unrealistic. I seem to never have any luck with the series I have a deep love for. Pondering over what could have been also serves no use, since yes, we could have gotten a great Season 3 and 4, or Magi could have ended up being in 7 Deadly Sins' place. Instead, I wish for something a bit more realistic and simple, that those of you that haven't given this series a try do so, and those of you that are already in the Simbad fan club, put someone else on. Some of my favorite characters ever, great comedy and action, and a story that asks many questions and explores the flaws of the world and its characters seriously with a lot of thought and care while still providing hope. No matter who you are and what your destiny is, we can all come to an understanding. Even if the anime never returns, Magi will always be a story worth telling.